Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. My name's Paul John Dykes.
My name's Kevin Graham.
And today we're joined by Gerry McCulloch. Welcome to the show, Gerry.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. What we do here, Gerry, is we chat to you about your Celtic journey. Mm-hmm. So you've got a very interesting journey because it's not only as a fan but someone who has ended up being employed by the club. When you think back to your youth being brought up in Saltcoats, what's your memories of Celtic back then?
Back then as a young boy, I grew up next to a big playing field in Saltcoats. So being a football fan from such a young age, football was everything. You didn't have the distractions that you do nowadays when you're a young kid. I look at my own young boy and it's not as easy for him just to go grab a ball and go out and kick it about. But that's what I did. So when I was young, my life was basically football, playing football and supporting Celtic, and that was it in a nutshell. Came from Saltcoats, as you said, so of course we had the connection with Bobby Lennox, who, you know, is such a big Saltcoats figure, still is. Of course, you know, we were recently at the statue unveiling, but, you know, Saltcoats, Bobby's just Bobby. He's not this great revered figure, he's just Bobby. But the Celtic story is never too far away, and with the big connection with Bobby Lennox, I went to school with a couple of Bobby's kids. It was a huge part of your upbringing.
We had the Bobby Lennox guys in here just prior to the unveiling of the statue, and they were talking about this omnipresence of Bobby. You know, you're growing up, you know all about him, the story of Lisbon. Is that part of not your decision to be a Celtic fan? Is that part of the reason behind it, or is that passed down from generation to generation, Gerry?
It's just passed down. You don't decide to be a Celtic fan. You're kind of told, aren't you? You know, that's kind of what it's like. Although you don't remember being told because you were so young. But there was never a moment where you think, okay, I'm going to be a Celtic fan. There was never a moment where you had all these teams laid out in front of you and you had to decide which one you were going to support. It just didn't happen. You were a Celtic fan.
It's always interesting when you get a Decanio saying, I always used to love the green and white hoops when I played Subutio, you know, when I was 8. And you think you're a liar.
Yeah, exactly. No, you didn't. And of course, back then, you didn't get what you get nowadays, which is, you know, 3 new strips every season. You know, a new Celtic strip coming out was a big event, and I remember getting the new hoops top when it came out, and I just used to live in them.
Yeah, I mean, looking back to those times, Gerry, did you travel on a supporters bus? How did you actually see the club? Because it wasn't as easy as you said to actually watch them. You would have to go to the games.
Yeah, it wasn't, and my dad was obviously, you know, my kind of influence, and my papa, so his dad as well, and my nana, she was a big football fan. So the Celtic passion came probably from my dad's side of the family, but they weren't big in going to the games. So that, and it's funny, I was chatting to Paul Cuddihy recently in an interview we did within the club, and he kind of picked up on something that hadn't dawned on me, that my life as a Celtic fan was probably majorly involved in listening to the games on the radio, watching the highlights of the games when I could, as opposed to actually going to the games. And here I am working in the media, and, you know, having worked in radio. So my love for Celtic was as much as anyone's, and I don't have to kind of, you know, prove my love for the club because it's there and it always has been there. But it was a little bit distant in the terms of I didn't go to the games until I became old enough where me and my mates could actually go to the games ourselves. So you're talking maybe the age of 14, 15, 16, where your parents were okay to then say, all right, off you go. And that's when you could go to the games yourself. I'm not saying we didn't go to games, because we did go to a lot of games, but it wasn't like, you know, supporters bus, season ticket kind of thing.
What was your first game?
My first game was actually back in 1979. It was a game against Hibs at Celtic Park, just a run-of-the-mill league game. I think we were on a pretty good winning streak up until this point, and my dad was very much kind of, you know, well aware of the tribal rivalry in Scottish football, and, you know, when we talk about it, he wasn't keen on getting me kind of immersed in that too young. However, I was 7 when I went to my first game, so I was young enough, and it was a pretty safe bet. we were going to win the game. We'd been on a good run. It was against Hibs. It was at home. First game. I still remember to this day walking up the steps and that first view you get as a kid when you see the full stadium in front of you.
The ball.
It's the ball. Incredible. And I think it was probably the main stand. My dad probably lifted me over the turnstile up, and then you see and you look across to the jungle, and it's just the most amazing thing. And we got beat 1-0 after that, and my dad said then, that's it, you're a jinx, you're not coming back. That was my first Celtic game. Ironically, before that, I think I'm right saying before that was my first ever game, which was Maradona's debut for Argentina.
Wow.
At Hampden Park.
Right.
Just after they'd won the World Cup, they came to Hampden, played one of their first games there. Maradona, who hadn't played in the World Cup, was just coming through as a 17-year-old, scored his first goal at Hampden Park for Argentina. That was my first ever game.
That's a great claim to fame.
That is,
I always remember it was the early 90s, late 80s, and being soaked to the skin at a Celtic Rangers game. My dad take me to the jungle and saying, "Don't worry, because once you get in there, you'll get a heat." And it's incredible. You went in amongst that massive bodies, and then you
sometimes you
wonder
wonder where the heat was coming from, though. Yeah.
Sometimes it was a wet
A wet heat.
and there was
Looking
this steam, kind of rising,
Yeah.
and the smells and everything. It's incredible that it's the smells and that kind of thing that you remember about the games. Yeah.
Do you think because when you were growing up, you were no regular going to the games? When you became a regular going to the games, it became your love for Celtic grew because you weren't going every week. It was more like, I only get to go every so often if you came up.
I don't think
absence makes
I don't think my love for Celtic grew because you wouldn't have got a bigger Celtic fan than me. My dad was probably a bit more into international football. My dad loved he loved a Scotland game, So as I said, he took me to Hampden Park before Celtic Park, but I was very much a club football guy. So I was very much Celtic was my first passion. So I wouldn't say when I started going to the games more regularly, my love for the club got more, because it couldn't possibly.
Yeah.
You just kind of felt a bit more part of it. And I suppose back then, when you're a young guy, going through your kind of formative years, it was a very male orientated day out, if you like, and so it did make you feel like you were one of the guys, that you were a grown up man going there with your pals. It was a very kind of a male thing to do, but I wouldn't say it made me feel any more love towards Celtic. You just felt more part of it.
More part of it. Who was your Celtic team then growing up? When you look back, what team do you? So that was my team.
The very early days, of course, you're looking at late 70s, early 80s, so it was that team that won the Scottish Cup, 1980 Scottish Cup. George McCluskey was the kind of first real number 9, your first real striker that I remember. From then on, getting towards the stage, going to the games, you're looking at 86, the team that won it at Love Street in the famous game last day of the season. So that team, your Paul McStays, Tommy Burns, Murdo McLeod, Pat Bonner, Danny McGrain, those are the guys. That's the team that I remember. I was also a big Charlie Nicholas fan. Just going back a bit before that, I love Charlie, and the fact that when he moved down to Arsenal, I actually then kind of, crazy when you think back, I became an Arsenal fan because Charlie Nicholas played for Arsenal. The kind of weird things you do. So I did. I liked Charlie Nicholas, and
he was an exciting player, and he had that kind of gallus approach to the game, and he was a good looking guy, stylish. I say stylish, no socks, rolled up suit jackets to the
came back
elbow.
in. That fashion came back in.
Stylish, but when you look back in some of the pictures with the leather trousers and oh no.
Fantastic. But that team you're talking about, the Love Street team, it's cropped up. It seems to crop up with everyone of a certain generation, Gerry. I mean, looking at that, if you started going to the games regularly and that's the kind of thing you're faced with, you must think, wow, this is some experience following Celtic. That, again, was one of these seasons you kind of describe as a fairy tale season. And then following that, there was a huge slump. And I suppose for the next 10, 15, 20 years, it was a bit like that being a Celtic fan, wasn't it? I mean, Centenary season, what's your memories of the Centenary year?
It's Centenary year, so you're looking at, I was 16, so it's, you're going to the games, you think you're a grown man, your parents are kind of loosening the leash a little bit, letting you do it. It came at the perfect time for me, the Centenary year, the cup semi-final, the cup final. It just meant so much. Everything about that year was just. But you could kind of sense from the start of the season it meant something different. It felt different. wasn't the best start to the season, but getting that trophy and the Scottish, especially the cup final day, it was the perfect sunny day. There was something about Celtic back then that we had this never say die spirit. You went a goal down, didn't matter. That's all right. Come back for that. That's just the way it is when you're a Celtic supporter. Late goals, like nothing beats a late winner when you're a football fan. We had that season. You spoke about the fairy tale at the club, and Billy McNeil, famous quote. Billy used to always say that there's a fairy tale about this club, and that season just typified that. When you think back, when you're that age, and you're forming your own opinions and you're kind of discovering about yourself and who you are, it's when you think back to that, you can remember it, but you can smell it, you can taste it, because the images, just that time was just such a profound time in your life when you're 16 anyway. But when that happens when you're 16, my dad was 23, I think, when Lisbon happened, and I used to always be dead jealous the fact that you're that age when something massive happens around Celtic. So for me, my equivalent, if you like, round about that age was the Centenary year. So when I think back on it now, it's images, it's smells, it's fashion, it's trainers, it's everything,
Definitely. I think that's why we tend to use the music in our podcast as well, because it brings back memories of specific times in your life. But at that age, Gerry, were you then obviously getting into the realms of moving into either further study or employment? What did you do when you left the school?
When I left school, I grew up, my passion was football, and I was okay. I played to a kind of an amateur level, but I was also a musician. So I pretty good. So I went on to further studies with my music career, my music studies. So I went to Glasgow University after I left school and got a degree in music, and decided kind of at the last year of that this wasn't going to be a career path that I wanted to go down. So what did I want to do? Having grown up surrounded by media, if you like, in the way that I absorbed football and things in my life, I decided I wanted to work in television, and I got some work experience at Scottish Television on a programme that you might remember called NB. It was an arts programme that used to run a half-hour weekly.
Our sound engineer is nodding his head.
He's nodding his head, yeah. Presented back then by Brian Burnett and Janice Forsyth.
Right.
So I used to go in there one day a week, work experience, help out. And it was great because you got to know people, you kind of made connections. And my first kind of foray into the media was in kids' TV. I was in my early 20s, and I used to work for Scottish Television on the various kids' game shows that they used to produce there. And they would produce some pretty big game shows in Glasgow, the likes of Funhouse, things like that. So
Pat Sharp.
With Pat Sharp, one of my first jobs in TV was I was the guy who used to go around schools auditioning the kids to be contestants on Funhouse.
Right.
That's what I did. So you could make the kids' dreams come true. So I'd audition them, put them on the programme.
You're talking about styles earlier, Pat Sharp. He was just
the mullet
styling himself, from head to toe. So you're getting in there and you're seeing how it all works, Gerry. In the back of your mind, with your love of music and football, you're thinking you're looking for an opportunity maybe to move into those fields?
In all honesty, not really. My kind of foray into the sports journalism side of things kind of came by chance, because I went to work for a channel through in Edinburgh called Live TV, which tried to kind of... there was an element of live TV which wasn't serious. Topless darts, things like that. You might remember. You're nodding your head.
I do remember that.
I don't remember
but they tried to go serious and to have a kind of a local news channel. So I was hired to go and work for Edinburgh Live. We were actually based in Easter Road Stadium, studio in the actual stadium itself, in the away stand at Easter Road. And somewhere along the kind of production or the preparation for the launch of this channel, which was supposed to be a kind of a feature-based channel, everything changed. And all of a sudden we were told, no, this is going to be a news channel. So all of a sudden we were news reporters, we were newsreaders, and we had to get the suit and tie on. And that was kind of my first foray into journalism. You're just thrown into it. So I did that for a couple of years, and then went along the BBC route, went down south, worked for BBC in Oxford as a journalist on the BBC News down there. Went down to London Was working for a couple of shopping channels TV channels down in London. I had a management position at one of the companies that ran a few of these channels. And after a few years, I just thought, I want to get back home. Mm-hmm. What's going to get me back? What's going to get me back home? And at this point, Setanta had started their operation out of Glasgow. And I remember one day just thinking, I really want to get back, and that's a great way for me to get back into it. I had no experience whatsoever in working in sports journalism. My passion was football. I could talk about Scottish football all day. And one day I just got a video camera, filmed myself talking into the camera, just about my own passion for football, sent it to the guy called Colin Davidson, who was one of the execs at Sky, but he was back up in Scotland running the Setanta operation. Sent it to him saying, "Listen, I'm looking for work. Here's me. I know about Scottish football," and I got a call a couple of weeks after that. The kind of thing that never happens in this industry. You never just, approach someone and they say, "Okay." Mm-hmm. It never happens, but it did happen that one time. I got a call from someone on Colin's team to say, "Colin, got your tape. Can you come up on Saturday and present a 6-hour live programme?"
Wow.
On Setanta. It literally was just like that, and it was a programme which took in 3 live European games. Right. So one from Serie A, one from it was the Dutch Eredivisie, and maybe the Bundesliga. Because back then Setanta had mopped up every, all the rights for all the European leagues, and here I was 3 days later in the STV studio with Neil Lennon and Craig Brown as my studio guests, and I was anchoring a 6-hour programme taking in 3 live European football games. And that's when it started.
How many days do you have to prepare for that, Gerry? 3 days, did you say?
Yeah.
And what is your preparation? Because if you've got 3 games from different continents, for example, that's going to be difficult for you to get the information so that you're confident enough to go and present the show, surely.
Yeah, it is, but you can get enough. You can get enough information to make yourself sound as if you know what you're talking about. If you say 5 things with confidence, then people assume that you know another 100 things, but maybe you don't. Mm-hmm. Maybe you just know those 5 things. But the way I saw it back then, listen, it's football. We're there to talk about football.
Craig Brown surely had a great knowledge of football, because he always came across when he was the Scotland manager that he was completely absorbed in European football. So surely he was a wee bit of help.
Yeah, listen, they were both great. I don't remember too much about it. It kind of went by with a flash, as it would do. But they were great, and I had grown up watching football on TV, so I knew what football anchors did. I knew the kind of way it worked. I had enough experience in television to be able to, for someone to put an earpiece in me and have a director talk to me. That didn't faze me at all. I was used to working in live TV, so that aspect of it didn't faze me. And I think I was just really lucky that I got at the right time, there at the right time, and from then on I got lots more experience with Setanta, a bit like that, thrown in at the deep end. I remember once going to Colin and saying, I'd quite fancy trying some commentary. Okay. And Colin was fantastic. There was no emotion with Colin, but he gave me so many opportunities. So I remember going to him and saying, I'd like to try out some commentary. And he went, "Okay, here's a game. Go and do this." And he gave me a Portuguese league game to go and commentate on, live on Setanta. I think it was Guimarães against Vitória Setúbal. And we did everything off tube. So I'm sitting there at STV in a little room with a screen in front of me of this game happening. And there I am, commentating. 2 days later, I'd said, "I fancy commentating." I went, there you go. There's a game.
Thrown right
into the deep end.
Yeah.
I remember one time commentating on a Milan derby. Huge game, of course. Live on Setanta. Mark Hateley, former Milan player, but he's never been mentioned on your podcast, was my co-commentator. But we're doing it, as I said, it's called, the term is off tube, so you're commentating to pictures that are coming through on a TV screen. And the way that the new STV buildings were sort of made, there were these kind of glass cubicles, if you like, that were right in the middle of the offices. So you had a big open plan office space, and in the middle of it there was like a glass tube, and inside this glass capsule, if you like, and it was glass all round, so everyone could see in, you could see out. It was literally a desk, 2 chairs and a TV. So people are working all around about you, and me and Mark Haitley are sitting in this room immersed in this Milan derby, and we're commentating on this to the Setanta audience all around Europe and I think possibly the world at that point as well. Just the most bizarre experiences, but great experiences.
Who did you base your commentating style on?
Oh, goodness me, probably nobody, and that's probably why it didn't get very far, to be honest.
I think it must be a difficult thing because you see people doing it and they tell you exactly what you're watching, and I always think, why are you doing that? You know, they actually, every pass, they describe it, every single movement. You think commentary surely is meant to be more than that.
I'm sure I heard somebody saying that the way to be a good commentator is to tell the audience what they can't see.
Yeah.
I think that's how Gary Neville's so good.
For me, the best commentators are the ones who... There's different types of comment. Obviously, you've got radio commentary where you have to be more descriptive because people, they physically can't see the game. But for TV commentary, the ones I think are the best are the ones who let the pictures speak. And I think the temptation for a lot of commentators is when something big happens, or the more important the action, the more they have to speak. Whereas in actual fact, it perhaps should be the opposite way around.
Yeah.
The less that happens, the more you need to fill in to keep the viewers interested. But then when something big happens, just be quiet. Just let the pictures speak. You don't need to jump in with stats about how many goals what you can do that when the crowd have calmed down. Ian Crocker, for instance, I think is fabulous at doing it right. I mean, think back to the famous Larson goal in the 6-2 game. You know, the famous commentary. He just punctuates it with words, not big long sentences or stats, with just punctuates it because he knows that the pictures are what's important there. So those are the kind of commentators that I like.
The balance between the commentator and the co-commentator's got to be right.
Oh, definitely.
They've got to have some sort of chemistry, because sometimes you do hear commentaries and you can tell that the commentator sitting with his head in his hands at some of the things.
Co-commentary is quite a new thing as well, isn't it? It's relatively new. When I was growing up, there was no co-commentators. You just had a commentator. It was Archie. And Archie could tell you what was happening and then give his opinion of it. You probably wouldn't get that so much now with a commentator. But co-commentary's now become an ex-player thing, isn't it, in general terms? And that's good, because for me, a co-commentator shouldn't be there just to tell you what's happened, because the commentator's just done that. They're there to tell you maybe why it happened the way it did, how it happened.
Gives you a kind of insight into the player's mind. So that's quite a journey, Gerry, from moving into the media to topless darts to then into Setanta.
I didn't do that, by the way.
Can we clarify, was it male or female topless darts?
Oh, it was female.
It was female. You don't remember it?
No,
I'm sure it was on Bravo at one point.
Probably
it was a Bravo channel. So you're now commentating. You've obviously dealt with and worked with people like Neil Lennon. Did you feel at any point nervous meeting people who perhaps you had watched as a Celtic fan?
I didn't. No, I don't think you can. I don't think you can afford to be. I would say I was. One thing I was always brought up with, and one of the kind of things that was always instilled in me from a young age, is that everyone's the same. Nobody's better than anybody else. And it was always told, I'm not better than anyone else, and just the same as somebody who happens to have achieved a lot in life doesn't necessarily make them any better than you are. We're just all normal people at the end of the day. So for all you could, inside if you get a little bit starstruck. I remember meeting Kenny Dalglish for the first time, and Kenny was my absolute hero growing up. I don't remember Kenny at Celtic, but the whole kind of Scotland thing, and Kenny, just I always had a poster of Kenny on my wall when I was a kid, and meeting Kenny for the first time, I was very, very nervous. They say don't meet your heroes, and I was terrified he was just going to be on a bad day, and he was going to not be nice. But luckily he was absolutely fantastic and just a normal down to earth bloke. But no, I don't remember getting nervous at all. I just loved it. I just absolutely loved it, and to this day still get that buzz.
Kenny, was he playing in the first game you went to? Was he playing at Hampden against Argentina?
He would have been. Yeah, I imagine he would have been.
Now, with regards to your commentary career, you said that
don't say I've got a commentary career, because
that was the end of it.
Broadcasting, yeah, exactly.
So what happened after that? I mean, obviously there's a test there as well. You're talking about Colin throwing you in and you being able to deal with that. Where did that lead for you at Setanta, Gerry?
It led me to Scotland Today News, ironically. I was still based in London at the time. So what was happening was I was based in London but I was coming up at the weekends to do a couple of programmes for Setanta. We used to have a programme called, if my memory serves me, called The Full-Time Whistle, which was basically a programme that ran from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock on a Saturday. So games would finish around about 10 to 5, and Setanta, we had the rights to all the games. And the idea was, as soon as the broadcasting ban, if you like, which finishes at 5:15 on a Saturday, as soon as that hit, we would then show the highlights of all the games. Right? Can you imagine that? That's quite a big deal. So if you're a Setanta subscriber, so the games finish at 5:15. By 5:15, we're showing you the goals from all these games. It was a big operation. So I used to present that programme with Ali McCoist, and second Rangers player mentioned on your podcast, just the way it was. And then I would do the kind of main highlights programme on the Saturday night, which was around, I think, 10 o'clock, 10 till 11, kind of sports scene type thing. So I used to live in London and come up on a Saturday to do those two programmes, stay in a hotel on the Saturday night and then go back home on the Sunday night. When I then decided to move up to Scotland full time, I was looking for something a bit more steady, a bit more not just at the weekend. And it just so happened that an opportunity appeared up the stairs, as it were, because Setanta used to operate from the STV buildings, and an opportunity appeared working with the guys on Scotland Today. So that was a great opportunity for me, and I learned so much doing that in the years that I did. Working next to Rahman, working under a guy called Howard Simpson, who was a guy that gave me the opportunity at Scotland Today. He's now at the BBC, and that then really did get you into the Scottish football world, because you were going to press conferences, you were interviewing guys, you got to know people on a one-to-one basis, and that was a fantastic few years. Difficult few years, but you learn so much when you're working the field as a sports journalist.
What years are we talking then, Gerry?
Oh, probably talking about 10 years ago.
Right.
STV had an evening show as well. Am I right in saying that? Had a football evening show on a Friday night?
Friday night, yeah, that I presented. It was called the Friday Night Football Show.
Funnily enough.
Or Friday Night Football, yeah. And it was myself and Sheila McLaren who presented that. That lasted 1 year.
It's interesting that you bring that up, though, Gerry, because again, going back to my youth, and you always remember the TV being a massive part of watching the football, and you knew when Scottish football was going to get shown, because you'd maybe have two programmes over the weekend. Friday night's a good time, surely, for a football show to set you up for the weekend. Are you surprised it didn't run longer than the 1 year that it did?
It is. I think the problem we had then was that listen, when you work in TV, it's all to do with rights and what rights you have to show what games. And the problem we had back then was that we didn't have the rights to show any of the football itself. So if you're a TV programme talking about football, you kind of need to be able to see the football. There's only so much you can do. And if you can't see the games, then you kind of want to be one of the first ones to be talking about the games after they've happened.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, in that sense, Friday night's probably the worst time, because the talk about the previous weekend's games has already gone. It's already dissipated. People are looking forward to the next game. So perhaps in that respect, it wasn't the best time.
And you've obviously moved about and done a few different things in the interim period of you going and watching Celtic in the kind of mid to late 80s. How was your support of the club? It would have been, obviously, you wouldn't have been going to the games when you're down in London, so you're just watching it as a fan from afar. And the ups and the downs of Celtic during that period. Centenary season, fantastic. 10 years later, we're looking at smell the glove, stopping the 10. What's your memories of that kind of darker period of Celtic's history?
You still supported the club. There was you didn't have a choice. It maybe wasn't great. The football maybe wasn't great. Through the Lou Macari, Liam Brady era wasn't great. But there was no question that you carried on supporting the club. I mean, I remember going along to the games. I remember being in the jungle when there was 10, 11, 12,000 people there. Difficult to remember. I mean, I just remember being a Celtic fan. I never kind of bothered myself beyond going and supporting your team. I never kind of looked at. I wasn't one of these fans who kind of looked at the bigger picture and sort of questioned too much the people that ran the club. There were enough people who did that, and thankfully at that time they did. Or perhaps the club wouldn't be in the great position it's in just now. For me, it was just about going and supporting your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you just mentioned there, the fans that were involved were people who were involved in, printing and distributing fanzines, for example, which at that time was your fan media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously come on leaps and bounds, and you've got things like podcasts and news sites, vloggers, etc. I mean, how surprised are you at the quality of some of this? Because some of it's really good stuff, and it's just 2 or 3 fans that are able to put it together. Do you think that that's something that can work hand in hand with the club?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, there's so much that the club can't do, and not even can't, but just can't do by virtue of the fact that it is the club. That a lot of podcasts and fan media can do. Nowadays everybody can be a cameraman, everybody can be a photographer. We're here in this studio. Everybody can be a presenter if you want. The opportunities are there. The technology's become a lot easier to work. So, in a lot of sense, it's a lot more difficult to make a career out of being a broadcaster because there's so much content out there that's produced practically for free, that's engaging to listen to watch, that can be listened to for free. But I still think the club media, obviously, because of the access it has got a USP that no one else can have, and I think that's the thing that we try and play on. We can't, as much as we would love to be the ones to announce a new signing, and the first time you've heard this name is when the club announced that this player has signed. The reality is that's probably not going to happen because it's the name's going to get out there. The fact that this player might be signing is going to get out there. Journalists are well connected. There's, agents sometimes talk before a player signed. The club's never going to announce a player signing before he's signed. So a lot of times we can be the last person to mention a name. We'll always be the first one to tell you when it's signed. Okay? So when you hear someone say, or another media or news outlet say, this player has signed, if you haven't heard it from us, then take it from me, they haven't signed. They haven't literally signed, and anything can happen right up until that point. But what we can do with the access is we can elaborate on that. We can flesh it out. Signing videos have become such a big thing these days online. And clubs try and outdo each other with sort of various. Sometimes they cross the mark into being a bit cheesy, and it's trying to kind of do something that the fans are going to enjoy and the fans are going to want to share and engage with. But that kind of element is something that we can do.
It's the first player interviews. I mean, over in Dubai, you had Timothy Weah, you had Ollie Burke, and this week you've had Damon Duff and Stephen McMahon has been back at the club. They're fantastic for a fan to go and own Celtic media and watch those interviews, knowing full well that the mainstream media haven't got that access.
Absolutely. So we can use the access to perhaps give you more around the actual fact that someone has signed. We can, fans nowadays are wanting more access. They want more behind the scenes access. So I'm always looking at ways, and we're currently developing new ways that we can take fans behind the scenes, perhaps on a match day, give them a full behind the scenes feel, from the minute the coach arrives till the minute the team leaves, as to what went on behind the scenes in that. So that's things that we can do that a podcast, that fan media wouldn't be able to do. But in terms of news, in terms of breaking the news, it's perhaps less and less likely you're going to get that from a club.
Going back a wee bit to your previous career, so you're at Scotland Today, maybe 10 years ago. What happened in the interim? You went and done a lot of work on radio as well, Gerry. Did that come next?
No, what came next was I went back out into the freelance world, and I got the opportunity to work for Sky, which was a great couple of years as well. They came and kind of took over Scottish football. So when I was at Scotland Today, I didn't get the opportunity to go to many games and report on many games because it was a Monday to Friday news programme. Then you had the weekends to yourself. The games happened, you became a fan. But I always wanted to go and work at the games themselves. So getting the opportunity to go and work for Sky Sports and actually report from games, into Soccer Saturday. So you'd be the guy there with the headphones and the mic at the games when Jeff throws to you and tell them what happened next. And generally, because Celtic were the big team in Scotland, they were the team that Sky would follow. I was their guy in Scotland, so generally when it was a big Celtic game at Celtic Park or whatever, then I would be the one they would send to that. So it was great. I'd get to go to the Celtic games, sit there, and then maybe, every time there was a goal or three or four other occasions during the match, Jeff, who was talking in your ear, would then just throw to you and you'd tell them what happened. I mean, goodness me, what Celtic fan couldn't do that job? It was just an absolute joy. So that was fantastic. Got to work in a few games down south as well. So I kind of covered the whole of Scotland and kind of north of England, maybe down to Birmingham. I'd get some games down there. So that was a great couple of years. And it was only after that I got the opportunity to move into radio, which is something that I'd always wanted to do, because when you work in TV, you're always getting counted down. There's always a clock on. Yeah, because the space to speak and the time to speak is so small. If you've got a half-hour programme, you need to go in with a running order. This running order has got time allocated to that. You may have VTs that have a certain definitive run time. You've then got little chat times in between that, but they have to run a certain length in order for the running order to exist. So you're always getting counted down. As soon as you start a conversation with a manager or a player in the studio, you've got someone in your ear saying, 2 minutes to go,
right.
1.5, constantly getting counted down. You could never really find the space to talk. On radio, you've got that.
You've got that.
And it was something that I'd always wanted to get the opportunity to do. So when I got that at Clyde doing Super Scoreboard, then I jumped at the chance.
Mm-hmm. The thing with the Sky show that you did as well, there was a good use of humour. It was obviously giving you great insights and it's keeping you up to date, but it was humorous as well, Gerry. I mean, did you ever get that sitting at the game, reporting on it, what was going back in the studio? Because sometimes it was just hijinks with
absolutely.
Jeff and all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, you'd sit, I would have the programme playing in my ear. You had to have it because you had to hear when Jeff was thrown to you. So you had to sit and listen to the programme. I mean, let's be honest, 9 times out of 10 they were sitting talking about English football, and then they would throw to you. You would be the voice for Scotland, and then back to them, and they'd start talking about Arsenal again or whatever. But
how hard was it as a passionate Celtic fan? No, just to let your fan come out when you're reporting on a big goal for Celtic, say. I know, what's the Liverpool guy on it, Phil Thompson? Everybody knows that he's a Liverpool fan, and we've mentioned Charlie Nicholas before. So
it's okay for these guys though, because they played for the club, so you kind of expect them to be. I always find that slightly odd, and I can understand why fans are a little bit suspicious and don't like some ex-players of clubs who now try and come across neutral, right? Especially when that player, when they were at the club, spoke about being a fan of the club when they were young and they were brought up with the club. And it was true, they were brought up with the club. They then play with the club. They're now in a position where they try to be neutral. I always think as a player, you're allowed to be non-neutral. As an ex-player, as a journalist, you have to be neutral. You're not there to give an opinion. You're there to tell a story. You're there to say what happened in a way that conveys the importance of it. Whether it's a serious incident, a funny incident, or whatever. You're not there to give your opinion. But if you're an ex-player, Phil Thompson, Charlie Nicholas, whatever, I think they're all right. They can give their opinion. I don't mind them being biased for the club that they supported, for the team that they played for. It's
good to see the footage of a goal get scored behind the scenes and they're celebrating. Yeah. Because you wouldn't expect anything less, But you've done a whole wealth of work there, and looking at your career, you've now moved into radio. You're covering Scottish football. Scottish football often gets a bad press from somebody
covering west of Scotland football.
Yeah, sometimes gets a bad press. I mean, there was results this week which showed that Celtic have had 1 million fans through the door last season. There's an incredible interest in Scottish football, isn't there? How enjoyable was that for the period that you were at Clyde covering the Scottish game again?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It follows me everywhere. I didn't realise just how big an institution the Clyde phone-in was until I worked on it. It is literally some people's lives, and your job as the anchor is to make sure you keep these people as engaged as possible. If you're looking, I better watch what I say. If you're looking for kind of sane, neutral conversation, it's not the place. It's not the place to be. But also, don't take it seriously. it's not a joke. It is serious, but it is serious, but don't take it seriously. I think a lot of people take themselves too seriously. I tried to kind of not take myself seriously on that, and encourage other people not to take themselves too seriously, but be passionate about the game and about football. And I love the people who phoned in. They were the real stars and still are. They're the real stars of that programme, the regular callers. However, the vast majority of people who listen to the programme will never phone in. So you're having to broadcast to that audience by playing up on the characters that phone in. And it was great. And sometimes I look back and I think, oh, right, maybe I stirred the pot a bit too much there. I still get accused of bias.
But then that's your job, being an anchor on that sort of programme.
Yeah.
That's your job, to stir up.
Yeah. And I discovered something. I realised one day when I started getting accused of complete bias, right? There were supporters from both sides of the fence, should we say, who were just so irate that I was employed by this organisation to present a programme that in their eyes should be straight down the middle, should be neutral, and they couldn't understand why me, the most biased presenter they had ever heard, was there, right? And I was getting this from both sides. So they can't both be right. It's impossible. They cannot both be right. Therefore, there must be something about the way people listen. And it kind of dawned on me one day that I think what happens is if you are a passionate Celtic supporter and you're listening to someone talking about West of Scotland football, which is predominantly Celtic and Rangers, then if you hear things that are against the other club or slightly questionable about the other club or negative towards the other club,
or don't suit your own opinion,
well, that's it. It's confirmation bias, isn't it? You don't think, oh, there's one in that column. You just hear it as truth.
Yeah.
You just hear it as something that you agree with. So it passes you by. As soon as the person says something that's questionable about your own club, you then chalk that up as being one comment that's biased against your club. So all you end up with, lots of chalk marks that show that you're biased against the club that you support. But you get that on both sides. It's just the way it goes in. Mm-hmm. So once I realised that, I thought there's no point in me trying to appease anybody, because it's the way it's filtered into the football fans' brain. But even just now, I mean, I still get it. I've worked at the club for nearly 2 years now, and I still get people who can't understand why I would be employed by Celtic because of all of those things that I said on the radio. Mm-hmm. Some of them apparently I said before I was even there.
Yeah, that's always good.
Yeah, I wasn't even there at that time.
So you mentioned Celtic there 2 years ago, and obviously even yet you're still justifying to some people. We've had a discussion about it as well with regards to the stick that you get. How did the job come up, Gerry? I mean, you're moving back into all forms of media, coming into the Celtic media team 2 years ago. When did you find out about it? Is it the only club you ever wanted to sign for and broadcast for? I think the question is.
I think we've clarified he had the Subbuteo team.
He did. To be honest,
definitely did.
No, to be honest, I was at Clyde and I was enjoying it, really enjoying it. But I did used to do bits of work for the club, for Celtic. So I would host some events, some functions. I would sometimes do work for the foundation and host some of their functions. So there was a bit of a relationship that was there. It was never really because I was a Celtic supporter and there was a relationship because of that. Maybe, listen, I never kept it a secret that I was a Celtic supporter, and there's plenty of broadcast evidence out there. If anybody wanted to know what team I supported, I would tell them. I never kept it a secret. I just didn't go broadcasting it. But if you wanted to know, I would tell you that. It's not a problem. It just so happened that no other club asked me. So there was a bit of a relationship there anyway between myself and the club. So when the opportunity came up, and I came up through various conversations, the opportunity to come up to go there and do the job that I'm doing, I kind of had a decision to make. I was at the time where, in radio you don't tend to get any more than 2-year contracts. It's quite a fickle world. I had 2 young kids, still do, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I kind of found that the hours I was working on the radio, albeit they were good hours in terms of the number, they were at the wrong time for me with young kids. So, my daughter, who was starting school at that point, she would pretty much come home from school as I would leave, and then I'd come back from doing the radio, and she'd be going to bed. I'd then be away all day on a Saturday doing the show. She would go away on a Sunday to do her dancing competitions all around. So it just wasn't great. I wasn't to get to see my kids as much. So when the opportunity came up, and of course to go and work for Celtic, it was the right thing at the right time, definitely.
Well, since you've came in then, Gerry, give us an idea, give us an insight into your role at the club. You're covering the games, as Kevin's already mentioned, the new signings, daily news. There's obviously this thirst out there for more and more media content from the club.
Well, first and foremost, if you take the Celtic TV side of things, we have got an established large audience who don't live in this country, who live abroad, who want to be able to see the games, and that's our core audience. So we're fortunate that we are able to broadcast these games live to that audience. So what I did when I came in was I tried to bring them even more into Celtic Park by taking the presentation of that the football match pitch side. So that took a bit of work in terms of the technical aspects of being able to do that. It's not just as simple as sticking a camera at the pitch and it broadcasts to the rest of the world. There was a lot of work that had to go into that. So that was one advance we made pretty much straight away. So there's the live game aspect, but within my team, Celtic TV is just one aspect of that, one platform, if you like, because nowadays people follow Celtic in so many different ways. You've got your Celtic Facebook channel, you've got your Celtic Twitter channel, you've got Celtic on Instagram, you've got Celtic on LinkedIn, you've got Celtic YouTube, which can be as big as you want it to be. These are all platforms in their own right. I mean, there's 6 I've mentioned, so you've essentially got 6 platforms that you could have you could work on a full-time basis. So it's a big operation. There's a team of 6 people in total who produce content for all of those platforms. So the stuff you see me do on camera is probably 10%, if you like, of my actual day-to-day job.
Yeah.
If you like.
One of the most memorable things that went viral was you and Coolio. How did that transpire, and what's your memories of that? It was quite a surreal moment, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I think I said from Compton to the Calton. It was bizarre. We got wind that Coolio was coming over, and Tommy Sheridan got in touch with me to tell me this, because of course Tommy and Coolio were good mates from the day in the Big Brother days in the Big Brother house. I didn't know they were still mates to this day. And he got in touch to say that he was coming over, brother, as Tommy would say. And I said, "Oh, do you think he'd come on?" "Oh, absolutely, no doubt he would, no doubt." So it just came through Tommy, and then I think I confirmed with the club that Coolio was coming. So they then thought it'd be good to get him down and do the halftime Paradise windfall draw, and then the rest is history. Gangsters Paradise. I mean, the thing is just that it was kind of meant to be.
It worked.
It worked. It absolutely worked. And then a lot of times when there's someone who comes and does the Paradise windfall draw, we like to see whether we can get them on, because it's literally a case of someone bringing them up to the corner flag where we're situated, and then we can just talk to them because we're live on air. But he was just so full of life, and he was just Coolio being Coolio. But it's just the most bizarre thing. I remember when we kind of clipped it up and put it out as a kind of a piece of content on social media, it was kind of is that Coolio? Really cool. Why was Coolio in Paradise? And then it all kind of fitted. Just bizarre.
The whole of British football was asking that question. It was a strange, but it was brilliant. In many ways, it was just brilliant. And obviously, the other thing I was talking to you before we started chatting today was that your Celtic TV subscriptions go far and wide. But this week you revealed that there is one specific subscriber. What's going on there?
Oh, you're talking about Vatican City?
Yeah.
I wanted to find out one day where our subscribers came from. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this information is, okay? So let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the information we had to hand was that there were, so many thousands from North America. And honestly, see, when you look at the places that people follow Celtic TV, it's incredible. I mean, obviously you've got your you get your army bases and things like that, but offshore as well. So if you were to put pins on the map of where Celtic TV subscribers are, you'd be putting some in the Arctic Ocean, in the North Sea, the rigs. It's the most far-flung places. So I got this list produced of where at that time, or where at the last time the information was available to us, the subscribers said that they came from, okay, when they fill out the form, if you like. And so it was down from like the most populated places of Celtic TV subscribers right down to the least populated, which was the Vatican City with 1 subscriber.
It's ever since Paul the Tim gave him that Celtic shirt.
Yeah, it could have been.
That's what it is, isn't it?
And I remember at the time thinking, wait, he's a football fan. He is a football fan. I wonder.
We'll need to check our download figures.
We get the heat map, and
exactly.
It's incredible. But the last thing for me to say, Gerry, is thank you very much for coming along and chatting to us about your passion, which is quite clearly Celtic, and thanks for spending time on a Celtic State of Mind.
You're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Gerry. Perfect.
Fansbet are a new online bookmaker who promise to share 50% of their net profits from tagged accounts for causes that matter the most to fans. The business is about fans and run by match-going supporters, and we at a Celtic State of Mind are delighted to be partnered with them. If having a bet is already part of your match day and something you enjoy doing on football, racing or any sport, then you can download the Fansbet app to sign up. If you do so, then please select Celtic as your club and a Celtic State of Mind, and you'll be making a contribution to keeping your podcast going and supporting other Celtic causes. They've already helped to make a difference to the fan community by contributing to fanzines, supporter trusts, branches with travel costs, and they were also part of the first safe standing installation in England at Shrewsbury Town. You can visit blog.fansbet.com to read more about that on their Giving Back page. All of our podcasts, articles and videos can now be found on intocreative.co.uk. This site encapsulates our love of Celtic, music, books, film, politics and much more. Pay us a visit, check out our shop for merchandise and contribute your working ideas to the site. As always, thank you all for listening. Join us again next week where we will have another guest with a Celtic State of Mind.